I've asked Bob to lead us in some exercises to kind of flesh out these areas of management a little more fully, and then he'll take some questions, and then we'll conclude after that. So, Bob.
One of my favorite stories has to do with a little girl who started to pester her mother to teach her to read, and she was just a little over 3. And her mother was a little worried because she didn't know whether she should accept that responsibility because the teachers were going to do it, and she didn't feel like she could really teach her child how to read right, and she might do it wrong and everything. But the child persisted and kept annoyingly asking her mother to do this. And finally, her mother couldn't take it anymore, and she said, all right, let's do it. Just get something, come over here, we'll sit down and get started. And so the child opened up the book and said, okay, what do I read, the black or the white? And one of the really strange things is it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And what we know about the way the brain processes that experience, it really doesn't matter. You can read both. But some rather strange sorts of things emerge from it when psychologists would try to check you out. But the reality is essentially everything that's taking place around us, and whatever rhythm it has, we have the capacity to step into that rhythm or step out of it. Now, I'm going to use just one context over and over again for the next few moments in terms of these activities. And that context will be cooperation and competition. Now, what I'd like to ask you to do is to commit yourself to paper. Now you finally found out what the agenda was for. You're really supposed to turn it over and try and write something on it. But at each of the tables, I'm going to ask you in each of these domains that we're involved with to use competition and cooperation as the primary focal points of the little acknowledgments and sentences that you put down. And here's all I want you to do. I want you to take the domain of self, and this doesn't have to have a single thing to do with Snowbird or something that took place on this campus. It can be something that took place in Salt Lake, or it can be something that took place when you were watching the Lakers, or gosh, I better not mention the Lakers. I guess that is a little bit touchy. We don't have any trouble at all in Colorado. We have the Nuggets. But in the domain of self, I want you to address when the last thing that you did that you experienced competition, and the last thing in which you experienced cooperation. Now, as I say, it doesn't have to be job related at all, but just in your life, at the level of self, where you were a person involved in the act.
Big, kind of epic like.
No, it can be a small thing. Be a small thing, like you got in a fight with a mayonnaise jar lid. I mean, it can have any scale you want. It's just that notion when in competition you blew it because it resisted you. And then do the same thing for an event in which you experience cooperation. Okay, these don't have to be, like life divesting. Who would be willing to share one of the experiences in cooperation? Just raise a hand and then I can point at you. Raise your hand a little higher. Right here, front row. Sir? I'll repeat it.
I just, in cooperation?
Yes, sir.
I just moved on to a new piece of property where the old owners have been cohabitating for the last 30 days. And so there's been a good deal of cooperation in us moving on and the old owners remaining there for a time.
Okay, here's a case of a new person moving onto the property. The old owners were still there and for whatever reason had to stay, and the people worked it out so that they stayed until it was possible to leave. Good example for cooperation. Would you have another for competition?
Sporting event, recent.
Sporting. What?
Tennis.
Tennis. Okay. There you are. In certain contexts that we get into, the whole notion of competition is not only appropriate, it's necessary. Because if you go out and play a game of tennis, or whatever it is that we're talking about, and don't put the proper amount of energy and passion into it, then it seems like a fraudulent experience for those involved. But the tennis court establishes the rules, and when you step onto it, it goes on. So that's a way of looking at that. Someone else, please. We'll start with yes, back there, please.
Well, I think last night I felt both of those quickly. The saddle of the horse hadn't been ridden for quite a few months.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was very much competition that I got on the back of that horse. But within 15 minutes, then it was cooperation.
All right, there's a perfect example. That, you know, the whole notion, there were two different vision statements, in effect, there, one by the horse and one by the human being, and the involvement in that way. Sometimes we are fortunate enough to see competition come into cooperation. Another, please, on the level of self.
What, competition?
Both, either way, we'll just...
Well, I was competing with myself and the traffic trying to make the airport time this morning.
Okay, trying to get to the airport in time. Many of you people have faced this over and over again, that your automobiles provide you with an incredible arena of competition. And a lot of people don't really realize when that's starting to happen. Well, I'm going to give you just a minor wellness activity so that you can sense it. You'll need both hands free, and so will I. So. Pardon me. Okay, all of you are in a chair, all right? Now sit with both feet flat on the floor in front of you. Put your hands on the seat in front of you or around your legs, depending upon which is most comfortable, but grab the seat wherever you have it. Now what I want you to do is to actually physically, with your whole body, start to get up out of the seat, but don't let your hands will not let you do it. So your hands are going to keep you in the seat, but the rest of you is trying to get up. And just sense what that feels like. Just get to that point and then stop for a minute and hold that tension. Okay. Got it? Now let it sink back into true relaxation. Okay, tension up again. Okay, now into relaxation. Now, when you are competing in an automobile, you feel like you're getting up and getting out of the seat. Give yourself that position. Now think about that on the way home today. When you catch yourself trying to get out, trying to get home a little sooner, trying to get to the airport, trying to do all of those kinds of things, you know, your whole body is leading the action. And so here's one of the characteristic things of all of wellness. Listen to the messages your body is trying to send, and then take action if you choose. And if you choose, you can relax. Because there's nothing in the world that gets you to the airport faster. I mean, you're not supposed to get to the airports on time. And then you hope for a delay. Well, all of those kinds of things begin to emerge, and so you build this competitive thing. The cooperative context is when you come back down into the seat and try to use the traffic as your ally as opposed to as your enemy. And that kind of contradiction might seem trivial, but at the level of self, it's a way you can check yourself out. Now, here's another way, and you don't have to do this because I don't want you to identify any human beings. But I have an acquaintance whose contribution to life on the planet I do not necessarily enjoy. And he is not a person who I would ever want to go hiking with, and so forth. So you all have perhaps that kind of a person in your life. But they always have to come down and ask you questions in your office. And so they call you up on the phone and say, I'm coming. And as soon as you hang up, grab the chair, feel yourself coming up out of it. You're ready to greet that person exactly that way. Now, it just may be one of your kids' teachers or something of the sort, but you have that sense and your whole body tenses and tightens up. We sometimes forget in this whole arena of wellness and in terms of the different scales of management that we're talking about, that every single day you have 500 opportunities to manage yourself into cooperation as opposed to competition. Now again, remember, if you're going to enter the arena with the ground rules being that I will compete with authenticity and integrity, then you want to manage yourself so that you do give 100% or 110%, as it's popular to suggest now. So again, what we're talking about here is that we have plenty of opportunities every single day to do these kinds of things. You've got a moment in your life in which you decided that today was the day that with the sun out the way it is, you're going to eat your lunch outside by yourself and just go out there, listen to the stream, and do that kind of a thing. You get all the way over to the forklift, you get the package together, you walk out, and somebody has to come up with a 15-minute discussion with you. And I find myself wanting to get the benches calling me, and the person is doing what they want to, and I find my body is trying to get out of the chair. You know, I've got that tension up here. I'm starting to crush the plastic container that has got my sandwich in it, and all of these kinds of things, trying to say, oh, yes, yes, and be, remain interested, and all of these kinds of things. Again, one of the great things that you can do at that point is go from competition between the person who has an issue that they want to share with you and the bench. And so instead go into cooperation with the person in front of you, and I can guarantee you your body will relax. At that moment of relaxation, the next thing that will happen is the bench won't seem to be competing with you anymore, and you will finish with that person, I assure you, 3 to 5 minutes earlier than you planned to. And the bench will still be there. Okay? So these kinds of things have a very practical attribute, and I know this is, I feel like parlor games here, a little bit, in a sense that when we do Aikido exercises from Aikido and so forth, they always work, but the thing is you feel like you've deceived your audience a little bit. But anyway, I just wanted you to sense that tension in your body. Check yourself out when you're gripping the steering wheel tonight. When you suddenly realize that the horn is bulging, or the airbag is beginning to deploy because you're crushing the steering wheel, you'll have data. Let's just consider that, data in the information age. So that's one of the contexts you can go with. And also the other context is the sense of peace and well-being that you experience in cooperation. Now let me just say that I could flash up here now and go to that other set of things like the integrity of niche. One of the things that an organization very often does, and I will suggest to you that this is a mistake, and that is they create a hierarchical chart of who's important on the campus. And that may be necessary to get funding, but it's very, very seldom necessary to create a healthy ecological management setting. That very often what we deal with is the notion that some people have different responsibilities than others, and with that assumption, that's all you need to go ahead with. Because then it means there is no way for our mind to create a hierarchy of importance. Now, you may have targeted responsibilities, but that doesn't make it a hierarchy. Because those targeted responsibilities that every one of you possess involve some other people that aren't here today, whether they're your kids, your spouse, or your neighbors, or whoever it might be. And at that particular point, the integrity of niche, the integrity of occupation of every person involved in an enterprise is important to contribute to the integrity and well-being of it. So one of the things that I want you to do, and I'm not going to ask you any questions, but I want you to try to commit yourself to paper. I would like for you to pick 3 contexts in which you're dealing with other people, in which they make a very, very positive contribution to your success. And it doesn't matter what the success is, but they make a positive contribution to your success. Identify them by name if you choose, and if you don't want to do that because your friends are sitting too close, then just simply put down a circumstance on paper, if you can, of those kinds of things. I am not going to ask you to share this. So this is a private engagement. But just try to find 3 people in your arena of involvement that contribute to your well-being without being asked. Okay, even if you're still writing, let me just go ahead with the next comment. The rest of the activity requires that sometime in the next 72 hours, without using what we call the patronizing reflex of a workshop, find some way of acknowledging to those people what it means to you to have them contributing to you in the way they do. Just think about trying to do that and see how easy it is and so forth. There's one thing that I am not at all approving of, and that is I'm not approving of reflexive strokes. One of the bits of research that was carried out by a colleague of mine named Mary Budd Rowe was that essentially positive reinforcement is a terrible way of establishing trust between people if anybody in the party perceives of it as being false or reflexive or automatic or on cue. Let me give you an example. It was very, very common for teachers through a particular period of anguish in my life called the era of behavioral objectives. It was very, very common for teachers to go up and use positive reinforcement and simply tell a child that they are doing an excellent job on reflex. I mean, they simply said, I'll go tell all of these kids at the table that they're all doing excellent jobs and so forth. Now, the point is that authenticity drops apart in there because the children start realizing that, in fact, these people don't need it. It's a reflex. It's just kind of a reaction. So they decided to prove that this took place. And the way that they did it, they took kindergarten children who love art. And any of you who have kindergarten children or have hung around them know finger painting is next to ecstasy and chocolate cake. I mean, this is it. That when they get involved in those different kinds of things, it's absolutely perfect. So, and the teachers then came in and started making comments about the children's work, all positive, all very reinforcing and very supportive. After the fourth or fifth go-round of the entire class, and this all didn't take place one day, it turned out that the kids were responding essentially to the teacher by saying, she likes everybody's stuff. And then a little while later, after that particular kind of thing took place, the outcome was even more poignant because what happened was the children were finding out how willingly they submitted to coercion. Because when the person was simply using positive reinforcement, they were really trying to coerce the child into another point of view. And instead of being honest and say, I would rather you did it this way, without trying to make it sound that this is a perfect job, they did, in fact, set up an ecology of coercion. So that's one of the sorts of things that I feel as though it's important to look at. So do try to talk to these people that you've listed there in a non-coercive, essentially what am I trying to say? That way. To try to do it so that you're not dealing in platitudes, but you are dealing essentially in integrity and acknowledgement. And if you don't want to do it out loud and verbally and feel that's too contrived because the guy up at the workshop said you should do it that way, just look at him and think it just for yourself. It's incredible when you're the Hopi people. I think many of you have had experience with the Hopi in Arizona. The Hopi people have a thing that is when you think evil thoughts, you increase the evil in the world, even if it's on a small scale. And conversely, if you think good thoughts, you add to the good that exists in the world. And the statement that comes from that, I've seen a lot of managers that live that. They simply said, if my associate screwed up, it's because my associate didn't have all the stuff that I could have provided them with. And so I'll go and get that done right now, operating in that realm. Let me try just one more in the realm of self, and then we'll do something really wild. That is, we'll try to save the Earth. We'll go for the whole planet. Why not? It's getting late enough in the day. We don't have to be reserved anymore. Okay, one more in terms of the realm of self. Think of a person that never tried to coerce you, but always greeted you and dealt with you from a standpoint of total acceptance, not agreement. Acceptance and agreement are very different ideas. Agreement results in consensus, sometimes forced. Acceptance, you still have dissonance, but you can go on. Remember, diversity nurtures survival, so when you deal on a base of acceptance, you can go on without consensus. When you're dealing on the basis of coercion, it's a forced consensus kind of setting. Think of a person that never, ever tried to coerce you. And again, it's not necessary for you to name the person if you don't want to, but put something down there that'll remind you of it. Now the second part, try to make sort of a promise to yourself that the next time you start to coerce someone, you'll stop right there and tell them what you're doing. You'll be right straight up front and tell them, I was just about to set you up because I didn't think that I could get you to cooperate in any other way. And find out where the conversation will take you. All of these, as foolish as they might seem in a workshop setting and so forth, are different attributes, and this is a very minor list, different attributes of things I can take control of in my own life when I begin the process of preparing myself to have a relationship with you. It's the prep stuff. It's the time lapse. It's the timed lapse. It's this wind sprints of my preparation to spend a big chunk of my life with you, some 8 hours a day, up at a place called Snowbird, or wherever it might be. It's the notion that I get a chance every day to take direct action on the way I am with myself and with you, if I choose to. This is not a requirement. Obviously, you can tell by the nature of the reporting and so forth that we're not after public disclosure, and we're not even after the suggestion that you have to relate everything to Snowbird. But the notion is, you live in a lot of other places than Snowbird, I am sure. And so the reality is that these are kinds of things that you can begin to change at home. If I remember one time when I tried to coerce my son into keeping his room clean. He said, Dad, I've listened to you give talks. I've read some of the stuff that you've written. And I've heard you talk in arguments and at parties. He said, you don't even straighten out your mind before you go to these things. He said, so you want me to do something as trivial as straighten out my room? And so my response, okay. And I went and wrote another book or something, but I got away from him. So just try, if you would, to play with that game. And think of 1,000 examples that I didn't offer you here today. Think of ways that you can prepare yourself to engage with integrity with the people that you share life with, that you share time with. And that you can do it in a way that doesn't ever require that you lie to them, or that doesn't ever require that you disclose something that seems graceless to disclose. But it prepares you to know the difference. Remember we crossed our hands a few moments ago, that funny little feeling of it being wrong when you went this way or right when it was this way? Try crossing your arms. Now cross those the other way. You see, you're moving up in complexity here. So some of you people look like you're about to do damage to yourselves out there. I don't know. But again, all of those kinds of things are just ways of letting us know what kinds of reflexes. I sometimes believe I know how to deal with people. And to do that, I cut them out of my life and just go back into my own history, instead of letting them make a new experience that requires me to abandon my history and become something that I wasn't before. And a lot of this stuff in wellness is going to strike you that way. You're going to see some of these guys that like to sweat. You know, and they get out there on bicycles, and they get out there and kind of run up the ski slope and do those kinds of things. Watch them if it doesn't seem to be your cup of tea. Don't go out there and be foolish and try to do something that you can't commit. But then when they're all gone and it's really dark, run 15 steps and see how it was. In a sense, what a lot of the sort of invitations to innovation that come with these kinds of things have to be left open, and they have to leave you with the prerogative of doing them in private. I have to tell you, quite frankly, there are a whole series of things that I really stay away from in these kinds of workshops. I stay away from dance. I stay away from aerobics. I stay away from the Aikido dances. When we do Aikido, I'll get on the mat. But when we're doing the dances, I stay away from them. But I'll dance when I'm by myself. And I'll go memorize those moves by watching them and do it by myself. And one day, I'll feel comfortable enough in that setting of people who are also taking risks that they haven't disclosed to go out on the mat and I'll dance. And then some of you can go ahead and laugh. But before that, boy, it'd devastate me if you laughed. You know, nothing's easy, even when you grow up. Okay. Any comments, questions, or anything so far in this little piece? Because we'll just move on to Saving the Planet next, and then I'll hand this back over to Dave. Oh, thanks. You make life easier. No questions? Gosh. Do you know that the native languages of North America, I'll come back. The native languages of North America do not have the interrogative in the original form? All across North America. Interrogative, the act of asking a question, came with the Europeans. And so here are people who lived on this planet easily as long as everybody else and didn't ask questions of each other. Another really wonderful little opportunity that you can extend to yourself is try to see if you can continue the relationships that you have in the work setting without asking questions, but instead making statements, declarative statements. What that means is something like this. I remember when I was working with a Navajo guy, and we were riding around Crown Point, New Mexico, and he said to me, you are a writer of books. And I said, yes. He didn't say, do you write books? He said, you are a writer of books. I said, yes. And he said, I think sometimes people take your words in ways you did not intend. And I said, yes. He said, I wonder. He said, I think I might be angered by that. And I don't know how you react. And I said, it doesn't bother me. I said, people can quote me any way they want to because it's theirs then. He said, well, that's good because words belong to the wind. Same guy, we're out riding again. And I said, I don't know where you get your firewood. He said, 3 rides later, he said, that's where I get the firewood. And the whole notion of the, without questioning, you very often are compressed into the present. And as a matter of fact, none of the native languages prior to introduction to European structure introduced the whole notion of tense. Everything had to be explained in the present tense, not past and not future, because it wasn't there in the language. So in a sense, a wonderful little exercise in kind of that sort of perspective is to know that a lot of the native people at first were put off by European or American or English usage because they feel as though that when we have nothing else to do, we ask a question of each other. And a question is essentially an assault on a person's silence. So this is an activity I'd like for you to perform. And now all of you can just giggle like heck at each other if you catch yourself over at the forklift or in your office or on the phone or something when you're trying to phrase something to this person you're talking to without asking a question. And you're all going to laugh. And he says, well, what the hell? You remember his initials, don't you? He deserves them, when you're referring to the workshop leader who told you not to ask questions. And if you think about that a moment or two, you'll see that perhaps there's some validity in that whole process. So try that for a while. Try to go for a full day. Just go for the rest of this day and not ask each other any questions. Make declarative statements. I do not know where you're going after you finish this. I don't know if you've got that stuff that I asked you for. I don't know if I can get those Xeroxes to you because this guy really did go on longer than I thought he would. You know, try some of those kinds of things. What it does is it makes you responsible for not knowing something as opposed to forcing a person to express their responsibility for not knowing something. It simply means I tell you I am not quite prepared in terms of information about this particular comment instead of asking you in such a way that you might feel as though that I'm aggravated because I expected you to have it already and it wasn't, and so I think that you're judging me instead of communicating with me. Try it. It's really fun. It's wonderful to do this, and it's really terrifying to do with your kids. They think something really bad has happened to parents. You know, my parents have stopped bugging me, and I don't know what it means. They still talk to me, but they seem not to be bugging me. It is really remarkable. Okay, here's the last one on the in terms of the scale of these things, and I'm going to, you're able to make the connections into relationship and into institution from these others. The last one is there are a large number of things that Snowbird is doing very, very well that goes far beyond the scope of profit, convenience, entertainment, and ease of mind of your customers. You're doing things on this site that benefit the planet. You are doing some of those kinds of things. List at least 4 of them that each of you knows of, and then add 4 new ones. List at least 4 that you know of, and then add 4 new ones. How many of you are on the second list already? Raise your hands, please. Okay, I'll wait a bit. Are you going to need the screen later? Are you going to need the screen later? Okay, let's spin through this. Obviously, you never get enough time, and you always have too much in certain instances. So let's just play it. I want the first list first, things that you know that you're already doing. We'll call these out. I will not write them down. But when we get to the second list, I'll write some of those down, okay? So what are some of the things? Just call them out.
Canyon cleanup.
Canyon cleanup.
Recycle.
Help me?
Recycle.
Recycling. By the way, if these don't appear on your list, add them. Okay, another.
Daily taking all the garbage out of the canyon.
Taking the canyon, taking
All
the
the
garbage
garbage.
out of the canyon.
Yeah,
Daily. Okay.
Encouraging carpooling and busing.
Encouraging carpooling and busing. Okay. Another.
Phosphate-free detergents.
Phosphate-free detergents.
Managing the watershed.
Help me?
Managing the watershed.
Managing the watershed. Oops, I got away from the microphone. I'm sorry, sir. Another? Okay, what are some of the new things you think you can do? Louder. Yes. I'm sorry. Let me do you first.
Teaching others to do what we're doing.
Okay, teaching. I'm gonna kind of change this a little bit, and I hope it's okay. Teaching from success, meaning the things that are working for you, spread it out. Yes, sir.
This is a little more specific. One of the places we don't clean up is the stream.
Mm-hmm.
We need to clean up our garbage that gets in the stream.
Okay, clean up the stream. Okay, yes, sir.
Get away from firewood and all, like fireplaces here in the village, I think.
Okay, reduce consumption of firewood. Okay, yes, sir.
Change more of our disposable waste to recyclable.
Okay. Shift from disposable okay, another? Yes.
Contribute, or continue to contribute to the familiarization to outsiders of the state of Utah.
Okay.
Tourism, if you will.
Extend communication to, I'll just put it this way, tourism, or tourists. Okay, another? Yes.
Better control our consumption of water.
Okay. Control consumption of water.
Electric power as well. Water and electric power.
Okay.
Maybe
Control.
some education on what all that, your water rights and all that up there are, et cetera.
Okay, clarify what?
Your watershed designations up there and that.
Designate watershed. Okay, please.
Plant something.
Plant something. Okay, that assignment is hanging on here, I think. Now, one of the kinds of things I would suggest, and I'm stopping, obviously this is the speaker's moment of convenience here, because the page is full, and so they stop and you think, whoa, gosh, what insight. But at any rate, what I'm getting at here more than anything is that you have collectively here identified a series of projects that can or cannot promote wellness to the site on which you live. So essentially, we're not just talking about wellness to ourselves, but we're also talking about planetary wellness. And so the notion is that you can be preached to by environmentalists, and if in fact you don't sense a context of wellness within yourself, you can possibly come to the conclusion that environmentalists are coercing you, and that you don't see, because of having addressed some of these same contexts within ourselves, that this in fact is the same system. Now we know pretty clearly that there are some ideas that are beginning to emerge in what we would ordinarily call commonplace worldview that have to do with treating the whole earth as though it's a single organism. And that way of thinking is very, very different than the kind of way of thinking that we have been applying for several hundred years. And it's the notion that it essentially is a total resource. And if it's a resource, it has to be a resource to spirituality as well as body. It has to be a resource to mind as well as spirit. So the notion that by doing these kinds of things, and just in the, as I said earlier, this artificial breakdown of self, relationship, institution, and planet, is simply for convenience. Because as soon as you can't differentiate between those, then you can be essentially assured of the notion that you're deeply engaged in wellness. Okay? Any questions or comments before I turn this back over to David? Thank you.
Here, David. Thank you, Bob. He has a way of limiting questions. Does anybody have any statements they want to make? Right?
Thank you. I didn't mean it that way.
No, we'd like to thank everyone for coming and participating. I hope this has given you a better flavor for what the wellness program at Snowbird is about and the dimensions that it encompasses and how it might relate to you specifically as a manager and how it relates to the overall management plan for this program. We have a short evaluation we'd like you to take a few minutes to complete before you leave, and Bob will be around here if you want to make any statements or even ask questions afterwards. So thank you, Bob, and thank you for your attending us today, program today. Thank you.